Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. It is great to have you listening in today. Jessica Donovan, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Laura Trotta, who is a friend of mine and also does brilliant things in the world. We are talking about becoming a zero waste household. So Laura is an experienced environmental engineer and award-winning sustainability educator. She's a passionate believer in addressing the small things to achieve big change and protecting the planet in practical ways. And she has very recently launched a book. I am in awe of all the things that she has been able to do. We are sharing the links to her brand new book, Sustainability in the Suburbs, in the show notes. I recommend you grab yourself a copy. It's available on Kindle or, a proper real book version. These will make really great Christmas presents for yourself or, for your loved ones. So today we chat, as I said, about zero waste and becoming a more zero waste household. I was certainly inspired by the tips and practical things that Laura shared that I could certainly be doing better within my household. So Laura talks a bit about how to adopt a zero waste mentality, what it actually looks like to become a zero waste household, and it definitely felt less overwhelming than I thought it might. She talks about her brand new book, as I said, Sustainability in the Suburbs. And she talks about this really interesting concept of moving away from a linear waste household to a circular household, which I found, really interesting and inspiring. So here's Laura. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, Laura. It's so good to have you here.
Yeah, it's so great to be on your podcast, Jess.
I can't believe it's taken us this long to get you on here.
We've caught up many times over the years, and I don't know, and other things, in your membership, and catch up personally outside work, which is always amazing. But it's the right time to chat on your podcast. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I'm really excited to dive into this topic today about zero waste households. So I know you've been a zero waste advocate for quite a lot of time, and you judge the zero waste category of Australia's Clean and Conscious Awards each year. Tell us what started you on this journey.
Oh gosh, Jess, I have to go back quite a way because I'll tell a story first. Did you ever watch the movie The Sixth Sense? And there was that kid, and he goes, "I see dead people."
Yes.
Yeah. So I was kind of like that kid, but I was like, I see waste. I see impact on the environment. But as a kid in the 80s, it wasn't something that was really common or even accepted to talk about. So I remember going on fishing trips with my dad on the beautiful Gippsland Lakes in Victoria, and his friends would be tossing cigarette butts over the side of the boat just into the lakes. And I'd be that 10-year-old girl like, "Oi, Dave, you can't put your cigarette butt in the water. Like, the fish are going to eat it." And, and they'd all look at me like I was crazy, and then look at my dad and roll their eyes and say, "Your daughter's an annoying greenie." It's kind of what they call me. But I don't say that with looking back and say, "Oh, it was awkward." That was just who I was. And I was trying to call them out in a nice way, but I was that girl that was just saying, "Hey guys, don't throw your waste over the side of the boat. The environment can't absorb everything forever." And I don't know where I learned that. I think it was just intrinsic. I was a brownie guide and a girl guide as well, and an outdoors kid, but I loved the great outdoors, and I had a deep respect for the great outdoors. But at the same time, I could see the impact humans were having on the great outdoors. So yeah, my dad was a bit of an eco-vandal. So I guess maybe I just grew up because I saw his behaviours and it irked me so much. I thought, I got to do something about this. And I did. I ended up going to university and studying environmental engineering. And I've now worked in the environment and sustainability space for almost 25 years, including and this is how we met, when I first fell pregnant. It's over 13 years ago, I founded my first business, Sustain a Baby. And that was all about helping other parents to parent with the environment in mind and reduce the environmental impact of bringing a new baby in the world. And it was a retail store, but eco-parenting retail store, but also had a lot of education around that. And I really enjoyed the education part of it, which obviously led on to podcasts and courses and nowadays writing books. So I can't really tell exactly how it started, but I think it was my dad pushing my wrong buttons and then me learning more and learning better ways to educate over time and leading by example rather than just being that annoying little greenie calling up my dad in front of all his friends. There's different ways to do it these days. But yeah, that's how it started, I think. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And that you were seeing that stuff back then when it was nowhere near the kind of, the topic that it is now. So it obviously was, what you were meant to do. So that's really
it wasn't cool. And like the environmental people, you were called greenies, but it was it was a derogatory term.
Yes.
So that's the 80s and the 90s. It was only really when I went to university with 50 other people studying environmental engineering, and it was a new course that had only been around for 4 years when I started with the first degree of that in Australia. And it was only really when I was around all those people who were very similar to me, I thought, wow, we're all going to change the world.
Yes.
Big goals. But indeed, so many of the people I went to university with are just in game changer positions in Australia and all around the world, leading in sustainability and environmental management.
So exciting. So tell us why we need more households to adopt a zero waste mentality.
Oh gosh, why? It's simply because there's more and more of us on this planet, and more of us on the planet just means we're consuming more resources, but we're also producing more waste. So I think yesterday the human population topped 80 billion people. If you think back when JFK was president of the United States, there was 3 billion of us on the planet. So we've almost tripled in that time in the last 50 or so years. And we're tipped to reach about 10 billion by 2050. So in the next 25 years or so. So there's a lot more of us on the planet consuming more resources and producing more waste, without a doubt. And it's across the whole world this is happening. But so globally, over 2 billion tonnes of municipal solid waste is generated each year. And that volume is projected to increase by roughly 70% by 2050, up to 3.4 billion tonnes. Now, it's really hard to get your head around those numbers. It's just one big number going to an even bigger number. But it's just such a huge increase, up by 70%, even with measures we're currently doing in place. And the main driver of that growth is increased prosperity globally and urbanisation, because you actually have to think that the majority of the world is in developing countries, and they want to live the way that we're living in Australia or the US or the UK. They want to live like a developed society, but developed societies and the way we live is actually really wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
So narrowing in on Australia, so Australians produce about 340 kilograms of household waste per person per year. So a family of 4 would produce over 2,000 kilograms or 2 tonne of waste a year. So that's what you think an average utility, a ute, is what? Is that a 1 tonne ute or whatever? So
I think so, yeah.
couple of trays of the ute. And that's more than 10 kilograms for every single person every single week. So reducing our household waste is so necessary, because the waste that we're producing is literally suffocating us and our planet. First of all, a lot of this waste is still ending up in landfill, where it can take hundreds of years, if not more, if not ever, to break down. When we're talking plastics, they never break down. They're always in the environment. So that's, every disposable nappy, sanitary pad, plastic straw, plastic film wrap, supermarket collectible toy, every single one of them ever tossed aside is still in landfill, not breaking down. So it's intact. And all of the organic waste that we do toss out, they decompose. But when they're decomposing, they release greenhouse gases such as methane in the process, which is driving climate change. It's one of the causes of climate change. And methane's a lot more potent to climate change than like carbon dioxide that might come out of your car. So, and at the same time, our oceans are becoming a toxic soup of microplastics that are I said they don't break down, but they degrade into smaller and smaller parts. And wildlife, fish and krill in our oceans are eating these microplastics, and they're accumulating up into the food chain as well. So impacting not just the wildlife, but those of us who eat those animals as well. So just in a nutshell, our waste is that we generate, it's changing our landscape, it's changing our oceans, and it's also changing our atmosphere because the decomposition of it's generating methane and other greenhouse gases. And so it's changing our environment, and because we're part of that environment, our waste is impacting and changing us too. So, yeah, it's a really complex topic. It's not a sexy topic. People don't like to talk about waste. They just want out of sight, out of mind. There's a great term we learned back at uni 30 years ago, NIMBY, which is not in my backyard. No one wants a landfill in their backyard. They just want to move their waste out of sight. But we need to talk about it. We need to get on top of it. It's a serious issue. And it can appear too hard to solve, but it's actually not that hard to solve. We all just need to make tweaks to the way we live. And that's why I'm so excited to come on your podcast today, Jess, to share some of those tips.
Yeah, and I love that you kind of just ended with that, because it can feel like this kind of insurmountable issue, and what's, one more coffee cup or one more, whatever that we throw away, how, what difference is that going to make? But, here at Natural Super Kids, we're always about what we can do, like within our power. Yes, there's external things that are happening that we don't have control over, but we can make a difference with our choices as well. So what does a zero waste home actually mean? And in reality, like, what would it look like?
Yeah, I really love that question because, once we can visualize it, we can create it. But what it actually means, a zero waste household simply avoids waste being the end result of consumption and strives instead to be circular. And I know we can talk about that separately later in this podcast. So, but circular basically just means there's infinite purpose in the products that we use and create. So they're not getting tossed aside as waste. They get continually used and reused, either in our household or in society. So a zero waste household avoids waste being the end result. And I do realise the terms waste-free home and zero waste home, again, we just said, can seem far stretched, but they are aspirational. This is something to work towards. So in reality, what a zero waste home may look like, it might include one or more of the following. So, and this happened to me this morning. It's actually bin day in my suburb today, and it's the general waste bin and the recycling bin today. So I went, down to the side of our house, looked in the bins, took the recycling bin out, and I looked in the general waste bin, no waste. I don't take that bin out today. And that we can go weeks without taking the waste out. And so essentially we're a zero waste household, but really it's low waste, or it's zero, dead waste, if you know what I mean. We're recycling and using. So you can retire from taking out the bin. And it's the worst job. One less job to do. One less job to do. So that's what a zero waste household ultimately looks like. You're just not generating general waste. You might also be composting your food waste. So you might have a compost bin in your garden, or it might be a bokashi bin under your kitchen sink, or a worm farm, or chickens where all your food scraps go. So you're diverting that waste, the food waste stream from your waste. Or you might be in a council that does also take organic waste for composting. So that might also be in the green bin as well. So not in your general waste bin. So that's essentially zero waste. They're getting reused or turned into another resource. And I know you're following a really health conscious. They're doing this already. It'd be minimizing purchasing of processed foods. So, and consuming those foods. Not great for our health, terrible for the environment as well. So much packaging. And it might, one piece of food that you buy might be sitting in a plastic tray, and it might then be in a plastic container, and then it might be inside a cardboard box. And then it might also have a sticker to stick it down. So all these random bits, well, they're not random, they've got a purpose, but all this packaging adds up and it's waste, and not all of it can be recycled. And particularly now with our soft plastic recycling in Australia, I guess, careering to a halt because we just can't keep up with the volume of soft plastics that are being collected. And Coles and Woolies have basically said we can't take any more. We're just storing all of this. This is something we really need to think about, because there's actually no end point for that waste at this point in time in Australia. So what else might look like? A zero waste household might have areas where you're collecting and segregating different wastes. And it might be like in South Australia and Northern Territory, we're really fortunate because we've got the container deposit scheme. So households in where we live in the world, we might have extra tubs where we're collecting bottles or cans or what it might be, and they then go to a recycling centre, but we get some money back for that. It's great for kids' pocket money.
The kids love that, don't they?
Yeah, or you can donate it to the local scout group because they're always collecting cans as well. So zero waste households have an area where they're collecting those. Soft plastics, although as I mentioned, that's a bit iffy at the moment, we're still collecting them in our household and hoping that issue is resolved soon. But realistically, it could be several months. And also general recyclables for curbside recycling, so you're collecting them, and organic waste, as we spoke about. Now, zero waste homes also are prioritising reusable items over single-use items. So that can be, so many things. Once you start switching things back to reusable, it's like, it doesn't really end. It's cloth nappies or sanitary products or handkerchiefs, or you've got a reusable straw or a coffee cup or a thermos or your reusable water bottle. So reusable items they're so convenient. They save the waste, and they're not that hard to do. But it's also looking at the waste streams you do produce, and rather than putting them out into the waste, you're moving them on. So can be consumables like clothing or toys that you're passing on to other people or donating to charity. So they're staying out of the waste stream and getting another lease on life. And lastly, a zero waste home might also prioritise renting and hiring or borrowing or lending rather than buying and purchasing new items in the first place. So using community libraries for books, and even hiring large items like trailers or caravans or even baby gear, a capsule for your car or a baby bath for a couple of months, and then sending it back to the hire place. So we're getting out of that mentality of ownership. And I know the younger generation are so much better at this because they're more, minimalism is something that I know the younger generation are embracing a lot better than the older generations, where we were taught, we grew up where status was, in your belongings and what you were having, what you were collecting. Whereas I find those 20, 30-year-olds are just wanting to live with less and have that less clutter in their homes, have that reduced cost of purchase and maintaining and looking after their stuff, but it's got that massive environmental benefit as well. So that's roughly what a zero waste home can look like. It's generally got less clutter. It might have more money in the budget because it's much more economical to be zero waste than the alternative. And you might have created a few extra jobs like burying the bokashi compost or feeding the chickens, but you're definitely not taking out a stinky rubbish bin each week.
Yes, love that. And I think that there's just you explaining that there's so many different ways and different things that we can work on. I've recently kind of come across, have you heard of the Buy Nothing Facebook groups?
Yeah.
And they're really great. I've been when I want to get rid of stuff, because when you just dump things at the op shop, you've got to think about that as well, don't you? Like how much of this is actually going to get reused and all of the waste that goes with that. But something we've been getting into is the Buy Nothing Facebook pages. So when we want to get rid of things, you just post a picture and someone in the local community says, yes, I'd love that. And it just feels really good knowing that they would use this thing that you might otherwise throw out.
Absolutely. And that comes on the point too. A lot of people keep their things and they want to upload them on Marketplace and have garage sales. It takes so much time and effort to move on your stuff. It absolutely does. But the Buy Nothing, we just put it out on our nature strip and take a photo, put it in our local Facebook groups and things. It's always gone within a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And it may not be something in tip-top condition, It might be something slightly damaged that you wouldn't take to the charity store, but that just goes. So yeah, you're right. That Buy Nothing groups are fabulous for that.
Yeah, and I think in a way technology is making this easier. Like you talked about the younger generation, like those more share economy, like Airbnb, and there's
Yeah.
share, cars, and you can hire caravans from, people in the community as well. So those kind of technology is making that a lot easier in some ways as well, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. Without a doubt.
Well, thank you for sharing all of those kind of different ways. And I think that it definitely makes me feel like it's more doable. It's not like we can't ever consume anything. There's lots of different ways that we can sort of work towards that zero waste home. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the benefits of zero waste?
There's so many, and I'll share. Some of them are just the way that you feel, and that is that lightness and freedom that you just, we get suffocated by our stuff. We get bogged down by stuff. And when we're not producing as much waste and just don't have as many belongings or clutter in our home, we do feel that lightness and a bit more freedom. Your home is actually healthier to live because it does have less clutter. You save a lot of cash. You basically save a lot of money on the regular purchase of single-use items. But I find the best benefit of a zero-waste home is convenience and freedom. And I want to share a few examples. So prior to moving to Adelaide, I lived in a remote town. You knew I was in Broxby Downs, a one supermarket town. Regularly, items in the supermarket would sell out or not be available. And it would often be things like nappies. And this was the town with the highest birth rate in South Australia, 30% of the population under 15. And if you were relying on single-use nappies and all of a sudden they're not available in the supermarket, that's really inconvenient. But generally, just everyday Australians felt that even more so during the COVID pandemic, with supply chains of lots of things getting interrupted. And so again, that was impacting things like toilet paper and wipes and paper towels and nappies and things like that still in the pandemic. But if you're using cloth nappies or cloth wipes or handkerchiefs, it doesn't impact you.
Yes.
You don't have to race to the shop when you run out. You just if you're just keeping on top of washing these items, doing a load every couple of days, it's no big deal. You've always got them in the drawer to use. Same as sanitary products as well. So I learned that when living remotely, when we had to become a lot more self-sufficient. And I just, that freedom that came with that was amazing. But I think a lot of people learned that the hard way.
Yes.
During the COVID-19 pandemic with supply chains getting turned upside down.
Yeah, such a good example. So yeah, that's one of the major benefits, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's just freedom and convenience. And it goes against the messaging, the marketing messages that were pumped so heavily during the 70s and 80s, particularly on mums. Like 70s was when disposable nappies, and early 80s were when they exploded into the market. And they were marketed as being convenient. But I think I look at disposable nappies as being really inconvenient. Inconvenient for society because they never break down, and that's a massive cost on our planet and our landfills and the monitoring and the maintenance and the construction and everything to do with that. But it's inconvenient on the parents because you've got a huge cost to continue to buy them, and you've got that disposal, that stinky nappy in your bin. And again, like I said, when the shops run out, you're left high and dry. So I think cloth nappies for 5 minutes on average per day to use are very convenient.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, now I've got teenagers. I miss the days of, those hanging up those cloth nappies.
It never bothered me either because it was 5 minutes in the sunshine, which was good for my mental health.
Yes.
During what was sometimes a pretty tough period of life, So
definitely
hanging something up on the line in the sunshine was a nice break from being inside trying to settle a baby.
Yes, I agree. Definitely. So in your new book, Sustainability in the Suburbs, you discuss moving from a linear to circular household. So can you explain to us what that means?
Yeah. So some of your listeners may know or may have heard the term circular economy or even a donut economics. So the opposite is the linear model, and consumption of resources in most households follows a linear model. And that is that waste is a function of items brought into a home minus the items consumed and stored. So basically something comes in our home, we're either consuming it or we're just storing it. And then we've got the waste. So that's, and lots of new resources are used to make those products that are coming into the home. So this model is inherently flawed, as it's based on the assumption that Earth has an infinite amount of resources, as well as an infinite regenerative capacity, that we can just keep producing more resources. But the fact is the world can't just keep producing finite resources. We're digging them up, right? We'll have to recycle and get better at how we reclaim them, but there's not going to be an endless amount of ore bodies in the world to produce the minerals and the resources that we need to sustain a high standard of living. So under this model, so the linear model, to reduce household waste, we'd cut back on the items we're bringing into our home and reduce our consumption to ensure we're minimizing the amount of unwanted or waste items that we're tossing away. But in a world where the human population and consumption habits continue to grow, and they're growing exponentially, the mere act of reducing our household waste is not enough. We need to move beyond that linear model and embrace the circular model, where any waste we create is a resource for another process, either within or outside our home. So we've talked about some of them already when we said, what does a zero waste household look like? But I just want to go through my 6 principles of a zero waste home. If you don't mind, I'll just read through what they are. We can dive into more detail if you want. We've got the time. So we all grew up on the slogan, reduce, reuse, recycle. I mean, that's kind of like imprinted in our brains, and on one side of the brain, on the other side of the brain, we've got slip, slop, slap,
Yeah.
So we're buzzing around with these slogans in our head. But reduce, reuse, recycle is just one little part of becoming that circular household, circular economy. It needs to be expanded. And my 6 principles of a zero waste household start with so it's refuse, then redesign, then reduce, reuse, recycle, and lastly, recover. So I'll explain them a little bit now. So refuse is all about becoming a conscious consumer and questioning every purchase you make. We really want to be stopping waste at the source. So refusing, like, no, I don't need that. Redesigning is redesigning products that we use, and a great example of this is, I love music just as much as I'm passionate about sustainability. And I would have spent all my pocket money growing up on cassettes and then CDs and music magazines, to be honest. TV hits and countdown, they were all over my bedroom walls. But I had a big cassette collection, and then I needed the Discman, and I had the cassette player. And then if I traveled, I'd have my full CD case with like 100 CDs in it. But the creation of Spotify and Apple Music, that's all gone now. That whole waste stream can be eliminated. And so now these days I pay a fee and I stream my music ad free, because I don't have time for ads. I want to listen to the music, and I'm very happy to pay that fee to stream my music. I don't have to carry that clutter around with me anymore. I ended up donating all my CDs to a community radio station back in Roxby Downs in our house move, and just hundreds of CDs, boxes of them. And that's gone. I just stream now. All I have is a smartphone, like so many of us now. That's a great example of redesigning out a waste stream. So, and once you embrace renting, streaming, or borrowing and returning items when you're finished with them, you can significantly reduce the number of items you need to manage, and ultimately the volume of waste from your home as well. So that's redesign. Reusing, we've already talked about a little bit, but obviously it's things like buying in bulk, packaging waste, which I know so many of your followers do already, particularly if they're in food co-ops and things like that, or even buying at farmers markets where that packaging just isn't there in the first place. Opting for quality purchases that stand the test of time rather than buying a larger number of cheaper goods. Just doing away with fast fashion. Go for the brand and the designer and the ethically designed clothing you want, and getting that one quality piece that's going to last you, a staple in your wardrobe for the next 20 years. So, I mean, there's so many great examples of brands in Australia that do that. I personally like Anthony Crawford, made in Melbourne, ethical designer and manufacturer as well. And also eating the food you purchase to reduce the volume of food wasted. So that's all about reducing waste as well, getting smarter with how we plan our food, plan our meals, cook our meals, use up our leftovers and reduce that food waste, because food waste is actually the largest waste stream from Australian households.
I've heard that before. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it
crazy, isn't it?
So that's the first three principles: refuse, redesign, reduce. The next one's reuse, which we've already chatted about. That's really adopting that mindset of single-use sucks and replacing as many single-use items in your household as you can with reusable alternatives. Moving on to recycling, we're already familiar with that one as well. So that's recycling the waste you do produce. But I just want everyone to note that recycling also uses resources. This is why it's number 5, like in the hierarchy of waste controls. We don't want to get to recycling.
No.
It's better to avoid the generation of waste in the first place than use energy and chemicals to recycle items and release greenhouse gases in the process of recycling. So, but one area we particularly do need to improve is e-waste recycling, because there's lots of precious minerals in our computers and our tablets and our smartphones that we need to reclaim. Those precious minerals are in shortage worldwide, and there's not really enough mines or ore bodies coming on board for those precious minerals to that's producing those minerals. So we need to be really recycling our e-waste and also keeping them out of landfill. And last but not least is recover any residual waste. So this is really any waste stream that you're producing in your own home that can become an energy source for another purpose. So in a community sense, this can be when items are in the landfill. The landfill's actually, you may not know, but we capture gases off landfill. So we might be capturing greenhouse gases off the landfill or methane and using that as an energy source in another aspect in your local town or city. So these things happen in a larger sense, but we can do that in our home as well. And the best way to do that is by, composting our food scraps, keeping that waste stream out of other waste streams and using that as an energy resource in our garden in the form of fertilizer.
It's such an easy thing to do, isn't it?
Oh, it's so easy. And keeping it out of your bin just reduces those smells in the kitchen as well.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hygienic. So that's really by refusing, redesigning, reducing, reusing, recycling, and recovering. That's how we go from being that linear household to that circular household, where any waste that we do produce is a resource for either in our home or outside the home.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you brought up that, it's not as, the first thing we think about shouldn't be just chucking it in the recycling bin and then we're doing our bit like that. Yeah, I was having this conversation with my kids the other day. My daughter said, yeah, but mum, it's recyclable. It's like, yeah, but that, that takes resources.
Yeah.
So it's, getting people to understand that, your bit's not done just because you've thrown something into the recycling bin. Like you said, that was number 4, 5?
Number 5 of 6.
Yeah.
It's almost the last step. That's basically our safety catch on the drain before the stormwater flows out to the ocean. You know what I mean? We're capturing that last waste before it goes out. Or if any of your listeners work in industry where you wear protective personal equipment, that's your last barrier for defense, for safety and having a safety incident on yourself. We want to be engineering out that hazard, which is redesigning and avoiding it in the first place.
Yeah. And just even visually thinking about, that circular household as opposed to that linear. I really like that. I'm sure it's given our listeners lots of things to think about. So where can listeners go to learn more about all of this? We've covered lots of topics and there's been lots of good tips that you've given our listeners. But yeah, where can we go to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a few places, but obviously we've been chatting about zero waste and the circular household. If any of this is resonating with any of your listeners, they would definitely love my new book, Sustainability in the Suburbs. Zero waste is just one chapter in that. The book is a green living guidebook for modern families, and it covers sustainable eating, reducing toxins in your home, raising eco-conscious kids, ethical investing, starting a veggie garden. So it's all aspects of sustainable living covered in the book. And also we talk a lot about climate change and climate grief and what we can all do about that. So that's where I'd really point your listeners. The best place to purchase that if you're in Australia is head to my website, lauratrotta.com, and that's Trotta with an A. Just on my landing page of website, there's a link there that you can purchase, and if you want the hard copy, and that's sustainably printed at a carbon neutral zero waste printer in Adelaide using sustainable paper and vegetable based ink. So I'm really proud. So if you're in Australia, purchase that directly from my website and you'll get that sustainably printed copy. For listeners outside Australia, I would direct you to Amazon, and you can purchase it on Amazon where it will be printed in your company, in your country as well. And just search Laura Trotta on Amazon or Sustainability in the Suburbs, but probably just best to search my name and you'll definitely find it there. And of course, I have a podcast too, Eco Chat Podcast. I've just taken a few months off to get this book out into the world, but you'll find your listeners can either search up Eco Chat or just come again to lauratrotta.com, and you'll find years and years of tips on sustainable living at lauratrotta.com, and definitely, but the link to Sustainability in the Suburbs. But yeah, if you want to learn more, Sustainability in the Suburbs is definitely my best work. That's where you get all my best tips.
That's so exciting. And I'm so excited to have a read of the book as well, and would be such a good option or good idea for Christmas presents as well. We'll make sure we pop the links in the show notes so people can find it really easily. And yeah, I'd highly recommend. I know anyone listening in the Natural Super Kids community will really love Laura's work. And, your book, I'm in awe that you've written this book, obviously is a collation of your life's work. So it's kind of, we'll give everyone all the information that they need on all of those really important topics. So
absolutely. I just want to add one more thing. And I again, if you are that minimalist zero waste household and you want the Kindle version, it's available for pre-order now on Amazon too. And that's obviously Australian, Amazon, US, Canada, UK. Again, go to Amazon. If you search up my name, you'll get the option to get the hard copy, but also the Kindle version.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure lots of people will be interested in that. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom, Laura.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity, Jess.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.